UFC fighters are going out of their mind now that they found out that Conor Benn has just signed a $15 million deal with Zuffa Boxing. Let's talk about it. Okay, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back. Okay, as we know, Conor Benn has just signed a $15 million one-fight deal with Zuffa Boxing. For those that don't know, Zuffa Boxing is owned by Dana White, currently owned by Dana White and Turki Al-Sheikh. They basically launched this new boxing league with TKO, Nick Khan. Is it Nick Khan? I think something like that. Anyway, and now they have launched a major assault onto the boxing world, signing big stars like F.A. Jagbar. Well, not saying a big star, but like, you know, Charles Martin, some well-known heavyweight fighters. Yeah, anyway, there's a few other fighters that are on this. We know they signed Conor Benn, but the UFC fighters are now, you know, they're starting to speak out on this because there's been a long-standing issue with the UFC fighters and the UFC not paying their fighters correctly. And this has been going on for a couple of, I would say, more than a decade. You know, recently we've seen John Jones ask for $30 million to face Tom Aspinall. The UFC held out for about a whole year. Even though it was the biggest, probably the most lucrative fight in MMA history, probably would have beaten the McGregor versus Khabib fight if it was to commence. UFC still dropped the ball. They waited long, and then eventually they offered it to John. Said, "Okay, we'll give it to you, John." And then John Jones refused and retired. The UFC fans now, let's just say top fighters. A lot of you who don't understand about how it works in MMA, a lot of the top guys that are, a lot of top fighters, people like Alex Pereira, the champions talking like Islam Makhachev. Anyway, I couldn't go through the whole championship right about now, but I'm just telling you, Alex Pereira is one of the biggest ticket sellers in the UFC, and he is one of the fan favourites. And he's roughly receiving somewhere in the region of $3 to $3.5 million a night, a fight, right? $3 to $3.5 million a fight. In boxing, that's women's wages. I'm not even going to be right. That is women's wages. Champions in boxing, especially well-known champions, if they were the caliber of Alex Pereira, will be getting no less than 10 to 15 million a fight, right? Now, the UFC fighters, we've had loads of UFC fighters complaining about pay. We go back as far as Randy Couture, who had an issue with Dana White, Tito Ortiz, and plenty other MMA fighters. Some of you who watch MMA would know the whole host of fighters. Even Conor McGregor recently has had a few problems with the UFC. But if Dana White's willing to fork out $15 million on one fight, on a one-fight deal, what does this say? What is this saying to his MMA stars? Because some of these MMA stars who are on like roughly 3 million, 2 to 1 million, depending on who they are, a lot of them are more well-known than Conor Benn, and they bring more revenue to the UFC than Conor Benn's ever brought to any boxing promotion, probably Matchroom, apart from the 2 fights with Chris Eubank. So, you know, the UFC fighters, they definitely have a point here. And listen, this is one of the reasons why I'm just making a video anyway. I'm just rambling on. I believe there's going to be some type of kickback from the UFC fighters. I think we're going to see something here. Something's going to happen. And just remember I said this. I'm going to have to come back to this. I believe I will be coming back to this video at some point in the next 6 months to 12 months. But I think the UFC fighters are going to revolt in some way, or they're going to kick off or have some type of, I don't know, go on strike or something like that, because this definitely ain't the one, man. You know, you go out there and you put you risk your body on the line, and you're getting paid a fraction of what some of these boxing stars are getting paid. Now, it's for them to negotiate. It's for them to talk about, speak to their managers, see what's going on. But you know, I believe the UFC stars, because you know we've seen the UFC grow in the last how many years? In the last 10 years. The UFC is a monster now, right? If we go back 20 years ago, they weren't competing with the big boxing cards. But as time has gone on now, You know, especially after the McGregor versus Habib, and obviously had the McGregor versus Mayweather, and we had the whole thing with the pandemic and stuff like that. And then, you know, that's what put UFC on the map. In 2021, they grossed a massive $365 million gross profit. That was, right? That's after everything. So you can see what type of machine we're dealing with here. And, you know, they're making profits like that, but not paying their fighters. Sean O'Malley's a fighter who's come out and spoken out recently about Conor Benn, and there's been a few others. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I think I'll be making another video on this pretty soon. Right? Anyway, look, enough said. Smash the like button, hit the bell for notifications, get all new latest videos.